before the first white people set foot on the North American continent, a small tribe of Eskimos, the Ahiarmiut, roamed the central Canadian Arctic. They were the people of the deer. Their survival depended on the herds of caribou that shared the Arctic tundra with them. But when the herds diminished in the 1950s, so too did the Ahiarmiut. Stricken by famine and disease, they were relocated by government decree to Eskimo Point in the Keewatin district of the Northwest Territories, some 150 miles north of Churchill, Manitoba. Well, last month, the elders of the tribe, their children and their grandchildren, made one last journey back to their ancestral homeland, where they once again lived as they had done for centuries. With them went a remarkable Frenchman who helped make this last journey possible.
These are the last remaining members of one of the oldest tribes in the world, the Ahiarmiut. A Stone Age people, they were roaming the central Arctic some 8,000 years before the birth of Christ. Today they're meeting in Eskimo Point on the west coast of Hudson Bay in the Northwest Territories. Tomorrow they'll be going back in time some 30 years, back to their ancestral homeland. Their centuries-long connection with their past was broken brutally by waves of famine and disease which swept across the Arctic tundra in the 1950s. At this meeting is a Frenchman from Paris, Gabrielle Jeli, who for the past year has cajoled and bullied people into donating money and time to make the journey possible. He's lived in the Arctic for some 30 years and understands what this last journey means to these people.
I think it's just going to be beyond words to describe the joy, I think, of these people, mainly the elderly people, because being handicapped, most of them have not been able really to leave Eskimo Point, except perhaps for an occasional trip to a tent 1 or 2 miles away. So I think it's going to be a great moment in their lives, I think.
This is the land the Ahiarmiut call home, the endless waterlogged tundra stretching for thousands of miles to the west of Hudson Bay. These Stone Age people lived here for 10 centuries, fishing the lakes, collecting the berries, and hunting the caribou. They were the people of the deer. In 1956, Life magazine took a series of pictures as part of a project called The Epic of Man. The photographs showed a primitive people living in an Arctic Eden, untouched by the complexities and tensions of modern society. The facts were different. The migratory routes of the caribou had changed. The food supply without which the caribou Eskimo could not survive was drying up. The first to die were the very young and the very old. The survivors eventually settled within sight of a Department of Transport weather station on the shores of Lake Ennadai. The Kablunak, the whites who lived around the station, meant food. Among them was Gabrielle Jeli, freshly arrived from France, where during the war he'd fought in the resistance. An artist who had fallen in love with Eskimo carvings, he was working at the station as a cook. He began to feed the Ahiarmiut.
So when I saw the first Ahiarmiut in Ennadai, I just couldn't believe in looking at them. I couldn't believe that they were Inuit people, because they were just in such bad condition, physical condition, also for the clothing, and I thought they were different people. They were going through difficult times. I could sense this the first day.
In the late 1950s, the Ottawa government finally responded to reports that the Inuit were dying on the Arctic tundra. It ordered their removal from Ennadai, 200 miles east to Eskimo Point, but it was more like 200 years away. For the first time, the Ahiarmiut children discovered there were other people on this earth. A nomadic people from the central Arctic who'd lived in caribou hide tents in summer and igloos in winter suddenly found themselves in a settlement living among strangers. It was the resident coastal Eskimos who had given them the name Ahiarmiut, the other people. Eskimo Point is a town in part created by the vanishing caribou, a catchment area for coastal and inland Inuit who fled death and disease. For close to 30 years, the Ahiarmiut have lived here, their children and grandchildren adapting to a world they never made. It's hard to comprehend the culture shock they've had to endure, a Stone Age people suddenly dumped into the 20th century. The young people are the biggest casualties. They lost a culture before they discovered it. The strange and unpredictable magic of the shaman has been replaced by the moral certitudes of Christianity, and the search for food, which on the tundra sometimes ended in hunger or death, now ends at the bay or the co-op. This is the culture that the elders from Ennadai will briefly turn their backs on tomorrow. It's not a rejection of Eskimo Point, a generous community where doors are not locked and where strangers are not turned away. It's an affirmation of identity, and it's been a long time coming.
We, all of us, have been talking about seeing Ennadai Lake before the good Lord calls us back, and it was the subject of conversation for the last 15 years, and it grew, and because they are consumed by nostalgia for the ancestral ground, we all would have carried on the notion of wanting to go there. And tomorrow, the realization, landing in Ennadai is going to be something, I think, where an experience that will not be described by words.
The next day, the elders arrive at Ennadai aboard a twin otter. Nobody spoke on the journey.
After months of planning and preparation, a dream is about to become a reality. More than 30 years after they were uprooted from the land which had supported them for centuries, the Ennadai people are coming home. And for 2 short weeks, they will live on their ancestral homeland the way they used to live. And for one last time, they will be the people of the deer.
Okay, folks, you can deplane now. Yeah.
First out of the plane is Elizabeth Ahiarmiut, one of the best carvers in the tribe and one of the most dominant spirits. But for once, she is quiet, almost pensive. It's soon confusion and laughter on the ground. Gabrielle Jeli jokes with an excited Elizabeth Nanook. Then people begin wandering off in different directions, remembering. Eva and Joe Munich, who were in their 20s when they left Ennadai, find their old campsite where their child was born. Is it happy or is it sad?
Happy.
Happy?
Yeah.
Oh! But when you left, it was an unhappy time. It was sad when you had to, when you flew away. No? It's good to come back. You had how many children here? One only? One. All over the tundra, the Ennadai people are rediscovering their past. They have finally come home. For the families, the memories are poignant. Luke and Mary and Outalik were a young couple with a baby son, John, when they were photographed by Life magazine in 1956. John is now a man, and his parents say that he wouldn't be here if Gabrielle Jeli hadn't stolen milk from the weather station for him. So what does it mean coming back now, after over 30 years?
Kano tukikalak pa man na tamang otarapi. Ukiyot pingahagay kangak malak ti juid. Kano tukikalak pa.
What it's like, said Mary, is almost impossible to describe. She said both she and Luke are feeling such strong emotions that they can't speak. The words, she said, are choking in their throats. For all of the Ahiarmiut, and especially the young men, this is the meaning of Ennadai. The herds of caribou, which, like the Inuit, have roamed across the tundra for centuries. Once they were numbered in their thousands, While we were there, the biggest herd we saw was less than 40 animals. They were heading south. The migration will leave this part of the central Arctic nearly empty of caribou until the spring. One of the best hunters in the tribe is Ennadai, a gentleman made of iron. One winter, he went by dog sled from here to Churchill, Manitoba, that's some hundreds of miles, in search of food for his wife Mary and son John. Every day we lived with the Ahiarmiut people, the hunters would go out, and every day they returned with food. Now it's like a weekend hunting party, but once it was a matter of survival. During the hard years, all the game was shared among the families who either feasted or fasted together. Caribou killed near the campsite is butchered by the women and left on the tundra under piles of lichen. Almost every part of the animal is used, either as food or clothing. During the famine, the Ahiarmiut were reduced to scraping the hair from the caribou hides and eating the skin. They would boil the tips of the antlers for food, and children would be given small pieces of rotten meat, enough to keep them alive, not enough to make them sick. Eva Munich uses a razor-sharp knife called an ulu to scrape the membrane and parasites from a hide. On this trip, there was no need to wonder what was for lunch or dinner. The elders' children brought a lot of different food from Eskimo Point. The elders, they were content to eat caribou morning, noon, and night. The women set up their own fireside circle a short distance from the abandoned weather station where they sleep. And no matter how cold the wind, they would spend hours reminiscing and eating caribou.
How did Gabrielle Jeli help you?
Ano, they come out me you because you like him because he gave Jeli you. Ano.
I need to. You met where you love to. How much kamenyo? Kaya kosunyo ko. Nakakalungit. Kahit si Meta love to in minute.
Flour and tea and other foods. He used to just bring us food.
What was your name for him?
I know the named him Taamani, my father-in-law, because he used to give. Underneath. All the Kapluna people used to have their meals upstairs, and he'd tell the people to eat downstairs.
While they were eating upstairs, he would feed everybody downstairs.
Yeah.
I got it.
The lives of the Ahiarmiut and the life of Gabrielle Jeli touch constantly. Once he helped feed them. Now, working for the Northwest Territorial Government, he helps the Inuit set up their own arts and crafts cooperatives. The Ahiarmiut's carvings are defiantly unsophisticated and prized by collectors. The British sculptor Henry Moore, upon seeing one, once remarked, "I wish that was a Henry Moore." Gabrielle Jeli is compiling a history of the Ennadai Lake people, and he brought dozens of old photographs with him in the hope that the elders could identify the people in them. The pictures caused great excitement and occasional sadness as people identified dead relatives and friends. Away from the camp, the Ahiarmiut gradually slip into the rhythm of a life which is passing. Cecilia Karlak feeds wild blueberries to her son David, as once her mother fed them to her. The men, when they're not hunting, do what they did in their childhood. They're scraping the resin from the stunted spruce trees dotted around the tundra. Known as kutuk, it quickly attains the consistency of bitter chewing gum. They also collect a delicacy unavailable in Eskimo Point, leaves from a small bush which will be flash cured in a frying pan and turned into tobacco. In the evening, the women repair the caribou hide kayak brought by air from Eskimo Point. They are unselfconsciously recreating the way of life embedded in their folk memory. Once the kayak was used for hunting game, today it's a pleasure craft for Luke and Outalik. 3 generations are sharing this experience, from the grandchildren to the elders. The generation in the middle is the connecting link. It's only since coming back here that the elders have been able to talk about the terrible things that happened 30 years ago.
Your kids are watching.
David Surkwak, vice principal of Eskimo Point School,
Their grandparents.
Elizabeth Karatek, a teacher, and Tommy Aulajut, executive director of the Inuit Cultural Institute.
I never heard my mother talk about the past, neither my aunts. Maybe they're protecting me from the hurt that they felt. So I never ask, because if I ask, I'll just open up old memories.
Where even though we speak the same language, we're far from our parents. I don't understand what they want sometimes, and they don't understand me.
I survived because I was on my mother's back, and I didn't have to look out for myself. My mother took care of me.
What about sisters and brothers?
My mother took with her 4 children, and she pulled 2 younger ones, and the 2 oldest one had to walk. So she got tired probably and left the 2 girls, and the other girl died, but my other sister survived.
They froze to death.
She froze to death.
I was also at my mother's back. That's probably the reason why I survived. Mind you, I have 4 brothers and sisters that survived. My mother don't usually tell me how many we have lost, how many brothers and sisters we have lost.
What is the future for the Ahiarmiut tribe? Will it survive?
It's disappeared.
We disappear.
You use the
already
past
disappeared.
tense. It has?
We will have to sit down very soon and make a great plan so our culture will stay alive for us young folks and for our children.
For David's generation, the Ahiarmiut culture is slipping away. But tonight, on the shores of Lake Ennadai, the elders are keeping it alive. Probably nothing evokes the memory of their past more explicitly than the drum dance. It's the first time since the famine that the whole tribe has come together to sing, to dance, to rejoice in each other's company. And it's almost certainly the last time. Every Ahiarmiut has his or her own song, and by the light of 2 oil lamps, each adult has to dance. Nobody is excused, not even the Fifth Estate. We have been with these people for just a week, but they treat us as one of them. The last dance is for Gabrielle Jeli.
They live totally differently than other people. Most other humans seems to behave as if they were going to live 1,000 years. And we all know we will not live 1,000 years. And these people live as if they were living tomorrow, which is the healthier philosophy, I think.